Honorable Ms. Bimala Rai Paudel, Member, National Assembly. Honorable Ms. Saloni Singh, Member, National Planning Commission. Madam Saloni Singh, I'd like to welcome you in the front. Honorable Madam Bimala, I welcome you right where you are. Respected Secretaries of Government of Nepal, Mr. Keval Bhandari, Secretary, National Planning Commission. Respected Secretary Dr. Govinda Prasad Sharma, Secretary, Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development. FAO Representative, Mr. Ken Simidzu, UNDP Resident Representative, Ms. Asheni Labe. Joint Secretaries, officials, and representatives from Ministry, EC Mode, WFP, IUCN, WWF, DCA, KIRDAC, different CSO partners, development agencies, ladies, mountain experts, mountain enthusiasts, ladies and gentlemen. A very warm welcome to all of you in the second day of the Regional Policy Dialogue on Sustainable Mountain Solutions. This marks the first event of a series of events that will be held throughout this year, 2022, to celebrate the International Year of Sustainable Mountain Development. Looking back on yesterday, it was a very successful commencement of this event. And what we need to acknowledge is that the voice of the mountains, the plight of the mountains, challenges of the mountains, and some possible solutions were at the heart and core of the remarks presented from the very highest level, from the level of the Right Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Sher Bahadur Deuba. It was the theme of mountains were very much expressed in all of the remarks given by all of the top-level officials of the government and the development partners, which were further expanded by the knowledge, by the facts presented by the experts, the speakers, and the panelists. We had very interesting sessions yesterday, 3 sessions in fact, on three pillars: mountain economy, mountain ecosystems, and mountain culture, where Ms. Stella Tamang so eloquently gave a personal account of mountain culture and its importance. Now, without further ado, we would like to start the thematic sessions today. We would move on to theme 4, a very important one indeed. It's on mountain women. For that, I'd like to request our chair for this theme, Ms. Honorable Member, National Planning Commission, Ms. Saloni Singh, and hand over to you, Madam, as the chair of this session.
Good morning, everyone, and a very best welcome to the second day of the discussion on regional policy dialogue on sustainable mountain solutions. In the process of really realizing the celebration of International Year of Sustainable Mountain Development 2022. Since this is the second day, we have already started, the background has already been set, and we discussed on the issue. But today, we will, with the experts, we will be really sharing on expertise, technicality, and personal and professional experiences of the experts on mountain women. Nepal is a diverse country and home of the mountains, the most beautiful mountains, the most highest mountains in the world, but at the same time also the home of very difficult livelihoods, home of women who are coping with multiple different problems by themselves, and also conserving the mountain culture. You all have shared about the mountain culture and preserving the, essence, need, and the difficulties of sharing the mountain culture. But today, we will have much more deeper analysis and experts who are going to share and focus on women of Himalayas, women of mountains. So the day is dedicated to women of mountain. This session will have one main speaker and two panelists. One speaker who has regretted because of her ill health. And now, the first speaker, I would like to invite Dr. Bimala Rai Paudel, who everybody knows, I think, whoever is working in this area, and a very long-standing friend of mine, too. Bimala Rai Paudel is the member of National Assembly, as already introduced, Federal Parliament of Nepal. She is one of the 3 members appointed by the President at the Parliament. Ms. Bimala Rai Paudel serves an adjunct professor of development study for Agriculture and Forestry University of Nepal. Earlier, a member of the National Planning Commission, Ms. Rai holds a PhD in Development Studies from Institute of Social Studies, The Hague, Netherlands, and an MA from University of Manchester, UK. She is policy expert with more than 26 years of experience in the areas of sustainable development, natural resource governance, climate smart agriculture, peace and reconstruction, rural livelihoods, gender equality and social inclusion, mainstreaming post-disaster needs assessment, and so many other areas which you will understand and we all know about her. So I would like to invite Madam Bimala Rai Paudel in the dais. Then we have 2 panelists. One of the panelists will be joining us virtually, Ms. Janet Gurung, who is also our very long-standing friend, Executive Director of Women Organizing for Change in Agriculture and Natural Resource Management, WOCAN. Janet has been an innovator at the nexus of gender equality and climate-related sectors for 3 decades, working with both public and private organizations and projects. She has 18 years of experience in the Hindu Kush Himalayan range, 11 of them which she moved. As the founder of the gender program, Janet founded WOCAN in 2004, which is now a global network with more than 1,400 members in 114 countries to support capacity building and advancement of women's leadership and empowerment and gender integration. She is currently a member of Climate Impact International Advisory Council, the Sustainable Development Advisory Group of FERNA, UNECE Gender Responsive Standards Initiative, the Coalition for Women's Economic Empowerment, and the International Center for Research in Women and the Gender and Climate Investment Working Group of the Gender Smart Investment Summit. Welcome, Janet. I don't see Janet. Janet, are you there? Hi, Janet. Welcome. The second panelist we have here is Govinda Prasad Sharma, Secretary of Ministry of Agriculture and Livestock Development. Just before this position, Govinda ji has been Province Secretary of Madhya Pradesh and Karnali Pradesh, and Director General of Department of Agriculture Development. He holds PhD in Agriculture and Research Economics, from University of Western Australia in Agricultural Affairs. He is in civil service for at least 21 years. He had published dozens of publications and authored many books. Welcome, Dr. Govinda Sharma. Please have a seat. Now I would like to invite the speaker, but the time I would like to just give you some norms. Time is very valuable. We also need to be within time. So I would like to request you to complete your presentations within 20 minutes, and the panelists will have 10 minutes so that we can have some question and answer sessions too. So I would like to invite Pimla. You can present from there too. I won't go there. Yeah.
तल राख्दा हुँदैन एउटा मात्रै भयो हैन दुईटा चाहिन्छ Good morning. Namaste and good morning to everyone. Good morning here, all present physically, and namaste and good morning, good afternoon to those who are connected virtually. Namaste everyone. Thank you so much. Thank you, organizers, for allowing me again to present some of my views. Yesterday, I made my views on overall mountain year of development, but today I'm talking specifically on mountain women. As I said yesterday, we know very little about mountain women compared to that we know about women of hill and Tarai. So with this apology right from the beginning, I would like to share my thoughts, my experiences, and my knowledge regarding the topic. But as I said yesterday, there are issues that we know, there are challenges that we know. We have been discussing on this from several years. Now, it is less to celebrate and more to act on. So, today, while I'm talking about mountain women, my focus is mainly identifying the gaps and identifying the solutions. What can we do and where to start from? So my focus will be on solution and actions rather than analyzing mountain women situation again. The topic that I gave is mountain women, key drivers and contributors of sustainable mountain solutions. I'll try to finish my things in 20 minutes. I hope I don't take that much. The talking point, as we have been discussing on this topic since yesterday, I will try to situate women in mountain context, give one slide on characteristics of gender relations across the region, and then we'll talk about current state of affairs, especially related to where are the gaps in policies, where are the gaps in institutions, and where are the gaps in the interventions, what we have seen so far. Then I'll try to bring 2-3 good practices that we have observed in this field so that they can guide us to identify more solutions. And then we'll talk about way forward towards sustainable mountain solutions. When we talk about situating women in the mountain context, we know, yesterday also we discussed, that we are gifted by 2 important gifts, ecological and human diversity. These 2 important assets for survival of humanity in the mountains. And unfortunately, these 2 assets are at risk currently due to natural and demographic phenomena that we know. The geological formation of the mountains are fragile and that the ecosystems are degrading fast. These changes provide opportunities as well as challenges for mountain communities in their efforts to sustainable development, especially related to mitigation of and adaptation to climate change, ecosystem restoration, and improving livelihoods. We know the degradation of ecosystems, it affects everyone, flora and fauna, and people of all caste, all age, all groups. Still, women are more affected because of gender roles, because of relations and aided vulnerabilities. Women are not only the vulnerable. They are key actors in these landscapes. They are the custodians of knowledge and practices of adapting to changing climate and demographic conditions like migration. So we should not only present women as a vulnerable groups. We should present them as key actors to address those vulnerabilities. But unless they are empowered enough, they cannot do their roles. So the 2 days, we will focus more on how can we make women, those in inverted comma we say vulnerable group, to an active change agent to address all these issues. So any efforts towards achieving sustainable development in the mountains require empowerment and active engagement of mountain women, efficiency, effectiveness, and justice perspective. Because if we empower women, because we know that they are the active key change agent, if we empower them, then our efforts to address the issues and challenges brought by climate change or ecosystem degradation will be more efficient, will be more effective. And this is also a matter of justice. So common characteristics of gender relations across the regions. Mountain women are active agents, as I said, in the conservation, use, and management of farm biodiversity and ecosystem services. They are also the holders and practitioners of local knowledge and practices required for sustainable use and management of natural and human resources. Yet, they are disproportionately affected by climate change, variability, and weather-related shocks. This disproportionate impact, where does it come from? It comes primarily because of women's limited access to information and options for livelihood diversification. It comes from their less mobility and access to services, lack of access to services. It comes from their lack of tenure rights to the land that they are working on. It comes from their low decision-making power to apply adaptation services, adaptation measures. It comes from lack of independent source of income so that they cannot invest on what they want. It comes from limited access to credit and investment. It comes from limited access to education, skill, and innovations, and so on. So these are the factors that make women vulnerable as well as stop them to work as a key change agent. As in elsewhere, mountain women are assigned different roles, responsibilities, rights, and spaces by societal norms and practices. Many of them have inbuilt biases in favor of them. Local contextual differences exist, where women within some hill and mountain ethnic groups in the region have relatively stronger position within households and the community. Yet, in most instances, they too face limited access to and ownership of critical resources, unfair workload, because most of the women of all economic groups, all caste and ethnic groups are overloaded with the work. There's a huge work pressure. There is unequal power relations, underrepresentation of women, especially the mountain women. We see very little mountain women in the decision-making fora. There are discriminatory attitudes and norms and gender-based violence. My observation is that the women are visible at work. Wherever you go, you see women in the farm. You see women in the informal labor market. You see women in the informal vegetable markets. Wherever you go, you see women. But they are invisible in policies, programs, and investment when you talk about mountain women. There is limited recognition of specificity of mountains in the policies at the first hand. No statistics on mountain women. Just I give you one example. The Global Gender Gap Report, 2020, shows overall gender gap performance is improving throughout the globe, including that in Asia. But there is no disaggregated data for mountain women. There's no efforts to recognize mountain women's specific needs, priorities, and capabilities in the policy documents. There is feminization of agriculture and community work. There are changing gender roles, but without recognition and investment. There are many women now who are working as a de facto head of household. But being a de facto head of household means being a de facto manager of the farm that they are working with. They need extra skills. They need financial literacy. They need technologies to use. They need access to information. Where does that come from? So the major challenge is Gender role is changing, but we are not investing enough to prepare women for the changed gender roles. There is a lack of investment, as I said. Mindset and attitude is another issue. For this, we can go on, but I just quickly say that who benefits from investment on women? This is the question. Is it only women who benefit from the investment? Or it improves farm productivity? It improves your efforts and their effect on addressing climate change. Who benefits? The entire humanity. It benefits household, it benefits community, and it benefits entire household, entire humanity. But we, policymaker, what we think is, in Nepali we say, मैले यसपालि allocate गरिदिएको छु budget. It means we are working for women. When we talk about investment, we talk about this much we have allocated for women. But that's not for women. And this is the mindset that we need to change. As Kofi Annan once said, during the MDG period, I still remember, during the MDG period, he said, gender equality is a precondition. It's not a separate goal on its own, but it's a precondition to meet all the goals. And for the sustainable development as well, gender equality and empowerment of women is a precondition to meet all the goals of sustainable development. But this is the mindset that we need to change. Bottom line, unless mountain women are empowered, we cannot have sustainable mountain solutions, as they are the key drivers and contributors to the process. Now, this is the framework that we worked on a few months ago. I'm not going to elaborate it. Only the point that I want to make it is, this is not a sectoral approach that will take us to empower women fully. We need to have interdisciplinary approach, first. And second, we need to follow the program cycle management. In every stage, we need to see the visibility of mountain women. The issue is, I will tell you in later, issue is that there are things provisioned in policies, but plans do not recognize them. There are things planned, but budget doesn't recognize them. When there are investment, there are no human resources. So how do we implement those programs? So my point here is, this framework allows us not only the interdisciplinary approach, but also looking at incorporation of mountain women's issues in every stage of planning. Every stage. You mean policies, programs, projects, budgets, human resources, time frame, everything. State of policies and key issues. I think I'm going behind the time, so I will quickly read now. State of policies and key issues. This is a regional perspective because it derives from one of my studies that I did for UNEP a few months ago. So this is actually the learning from this study that I'm going to share here. Mountain specificity. Policies have limited recognition of specificity of mountains throughout the region, not only in Nepal. There is increasing recognition, but women empowerment and gender equality is seen as a cross-cutting issues. Wherever cross-cutting issues are mentioned, in practice, it cuts nowhere. This is what we have observed. If you have women-specific goals, women-specific approaches, and investment, it cuts everywhere. But whenever you say that gender equality is considered as a cross-cutting issues, in practice, it cuts nowhere. This is what we have observed in this region. There is also a victim perspective. So we need to really think about victim perspective versus capability perspective. Are we talking only as women as a victim, or we are considering them as an active change agent? This is the thing that we need to think for the policy. There is also lack of horizontal and vertical coherence. I already spoke about it. There is a limited space for mountain women to participate in decision making. Yes, we do have 33% women in federal parliament. I'm one of them. There are about 40% women in the local government, 50% in key decision-making positions. Yes, but where are mountain women? Where are mountain women in agriculture? Where are mountain women in climate change? So mountain women do not have good representation at the moment. There is lack of investment, as I said already. Key issues in institutions, human resources, and budgets. Many organizations, including the government, have adopted different mechanisms to institute gender-responsive governance. Gender focal points are in place in many governments, including Nepal, for gender mainstreaming, but unfortunately, gender focal points themselves are disempowered, as they have very limited space to participate in policy making, and they also lack mandate, skills, resources, and authority to perform their task. Capacity of national and sub-national administration is very weak. They only have basic ability to identify climate-related challenges and to propose and implement basic responses, but very limited capacity for gender analysis and addressing the gender gap. There exist significant gaps in the representation of women and marginalized caste and ethnic groups in senior technical positions and frontline workers across the countries. The patriarchal system, behavior towards women, norms and values, they are there already. And they continue to influence attitudes, behavior, and mindset within the bureaucracy and political institutions. All countries have provisions of gender-responsive budgeting, yet the gender-responsive budgeting itself is challenged on harmonizing and tracking the expenditure. We do allocate budget, but we don't see how much budget, gender-responsive budget is spent and what has been the outcome. We don't know. There is no gender-sensitive annual performance monitoring system of staff program and policies. There are good practices. We already talked about gender-responsive budgeting. Yes, it is a good practice, but there is room to improve. There is also good practice on institutions, especially gender focal points, if we empower them enough with authority, with space for policy influencing and influencing the budgets. There are several interventions and innovations based on, the private sectors have empowered women in general, especially related to promotion of labor-saving technologies, women-friendly tools and technologies, but their application is very much limited in the mountain areas, both due to mountain specificity as well as due to access and affordability issues. These practices have demonstrated effectiveness in mainstreaming women in general, but there are no specific initiatives towards empowering mountain women. So this is still a gap. Way forward. I just mentioned the immediate priorities. This is my slide. I think two more. Way forward, I would propose that we need to increase the visibility of mountain women at every level through disaggregated data. The first entry is there. We also need to increase the investment in infrastructure, budget, human resources in gender-responsive information, technology, tools, and methods. We desperately need labor-saving, women-friendly technologies and tools. We need to work on policy provisions and actions that need to move away from victim perspective and ensure building up assets based of women. Gender integration is necessary in all sectoral policies and strategies. We need to have allocation and tracking of gender-responsive budget, especially looking at mountain women. We need to have recognition and deployment of women's knowledge and capabilities. And space for mountain women's participation in decision-making needs to be expanded. 3 benchmarks for the year of mountain development. I'm not in a position to say that you have to do that, but it would be very good if we have set these 3 benchmarks for this year. Gender experts and policymakers need to be closer to the realities of mountain women to help them search and develop sustainable mountain solutions. We need to reflect on what already exists. We need to make mountain women visible in policies and programs. It doesn't take much time. Yesterday, someone was saying that things are very complicated, but I don't think that. Things are very simple. We just need to start working on. So if we start reflecting our policies and making women more visible, mountain women more visible in the policies, we can start from there. More importantly, we have respected Secretary of National Planning Commission here. We have respected member of National Planning Commission here. From that experience, I would say we really need to ensure coherence between policies, programs, plans, human resource, and budgets. And we need to ensure intersectoral coherence, at least among agriculture, forestry, environment, climate change, and water-related policies and plans. If we need more reading, we have 2 reports, one summary and one elaborated report, because this is the learning that I have drawn from one of the studies that we did. And I thank you very much. And I thank you, National Planning Commission member and chair of this session, Salunidhi, for inviting me here to make a presentation. And really would like to hear from panelists, Janetji and Mr. Secretary. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Bimla Rai Paurel, for your eloquent and very, strong, deep, experience-based expression. Thank you very much. Yeah, you may. Now, I think I should go directly to the panelists so that we'll have some time for question and answer. Would like to invite Janet. Over to you, Janet Gurung.
Thank you so much. Namaste to all, and I hope it's okay to call you Saloni and Bimala. It's such a pleasure to be in the room with you. I wish I could be there in person, but this is pretty good second. And I would like to very much thank Dr. Sindhu for inviting me to join remotely. Bimala said everything that I would say and so much more, and did it in such a beautiful way. But I want to bring a perspective. This has been, for the past 2 weeks, I've been engaged in multiple webinars and discussions about the nexus of gender and climate. And that's because right now in New York, the Commission on the Status of Women, that meets every year, is focused on climate. And so this has been a very active time on that. And I've been talking in sessions about Asia, but also globally. This invitation today allowed me to sort of recall my old days when I was at ISIMOD and living in Nepal for so many years and the region. And perhaps I can add to Bimla's by giving a little bit of a historic perspective. And that seems strange because I'm the outsider here, but it was a long time ago that we started to think about these issues in ISIMOD in relation to mountain women. And I catch your point, Bimla, that we know very little about mountain women. And that's exactly how we started at ISIMOD. And I was reminded that in 1999, it was 23 years ago, we initiated some research and wrote a publication that's still available on the ISIMOD website called Searching for Women's Voices in the Hindu Kush Himalayan region. And we did exactly what you said. We hired a number of mountain women themselves to go out and collect information from other mountain women to document the situations and their voices. Even at that time, we were quite aware of the double marginalization status of mountain women versus women of the plains and lowlands. And we knew the effect of their stewardship on the sustainability of the lowlands. We knew that women played a critical and dominant role in agriculture, natural resource management, and the very survival of mountain families, which you referred to as well. But we did not know anything really about the status of these women and their gender relations. And there was nothing documented by women themselves. There were just little vignettes in various documents that would refer to them, but not much. So it's very interesting to go back and look at those. I wish we could almost see it like a baseline, and I don't know if anything has been done since then, but it's interesting. And so I read that document again today, and it left me with 5 takeaways, which I'll share here. One is there's a lot of discussion about the feminization of agriculture. This is not new to communities in the mountains. Mountain women have historically played dominant roles, and the migration of men as herders or for temporary periods of time is historic to the region. So I think we have to remember, I think it's almost like the rest of the world woke up to the fact that mountain women have these very dominant roles, and so it gets termed feminization. It's always been feminized, quite frankly. 2, based on their roles, women are, as you mentioned, the primary holders of knowledge around agriculture, forestry, water, livestock management. And I think we also have to point to the fact that their skills are not often as upgraded in those areas as needs to be. And that becomes even more important in a time of climate change. Three, the workloads. We cannot talk about mountain women's lives without talking about the drudgery and the really intense workloads that they bear, much higher than men for fuel wood, water collection, agriculture. I wish I could say after 23 years that I'm hearing something different and this has changed. But it apparently has not, and that's, I think, rather sad. Also, we found even at that time that the self-image of women was often low due to, at that time, their low levels of communication, education, and exposure. Perhaps nowadays, you know, the internet has made some changes in that. I would like to think so. But that low level of self-image and self-esteem also affects their abilities to negotiate for resources. So even when governments at times devise programs and budgets for women, women often need to step up and step forward to claim those benefits and rights, and nobody gives them to them. So I think that's important. The other point is we often think about women in the mountains having more freedom and a higher status than lowland women. And I do believe the research we did pointed that out. And there was, even at that time, we were talking about how that higher status is sometimes endangered as mountain women have more and more contact with women of lowland and mainstream communities. So it's something unique to mountain women. How does climate change impact these? I think you've already said all of those things beautifully. The one thing we're reading a lot more about, not specific only to women of mountain areas, but is these higher rates of domestic violence and also higher incidences of sex trafficking. Particularly when communities are placed in, you know, when there's a disaster or there's a particularly dire situation in terms of the degradation of the environment. This is often what women are forced to seek as livelihoods, unfortunately. And I think the other thing to point out is that these existing inequalities, gender inequalities, are exacerbated by climate change and the kind of stresses that brings. However, I want to say that I'm an eternal optimist and I see opportunities all the time, and this is no different. And I have to say that within the climate change community, this year and this COP we had in Glasgow recently is different. WOCAN has been sort of advocating for more attention and resources at this nexus of gender and climate for at least a decade, and it's been a very difficult push. Suddenly things have changed. I think this meeting in New York this week is evidence of that, but there's a lot of talk about the nexus of gender and climate, and importantly, with the third word in the sentence, which is finance. And that's the critical word, as you so eloquently pointed out. And I'd just like to say, people may not realize this, but existing data shows that less than 10% of climate finance flows to the local level, and less than 1% of gender equality funding from governments flows to women's organizations. At WOCAN, we've seen not only in the HKH, but around the world, it's been this tremendous, I would say, untapped potential of women's organizations, women's collectives, whether they're managing forests, as is so beautifully done in Nepal, or they're managing water supplies, or they're managing agricultural resources. Women collectives have incredible potential to be able to tackle these big problems of food insecurity, poverty, and climate change. However, nobody is paying attention to them, and there's just very little resources that are flowing in their direction. So I think, for me, that's for us at WOCAN, that's really the strategic area that I think we could make some change in. But we can always think that you talked, Bimla, also about the contributions of women. We don't even use what I call the V words anymore. That's sort of banned from our lexicon about victims and vulnerable women. It doesn't help us. It doesn't point to, I mean, here on one hand are mountain women who are responsible for the very survival of their households and communities under difficult environments. And so these are not to be seen as vulnerable people. And so I think we also understand that the contributions that these women make to climate mitigation needs to not only be recognized, but I would say needs to be compensated. So we talk about unpaid care work of women, and we've seen around the world during COVID that that's become more obvious to people, that women's unpaid care is what's enabling households and communities to exist. And I would like to extend that to thinking of how they're caring for the environment as well. When women are managing trees, plantations, community forests in Nepal, there's no compensation for that type of thing. So, but it could be. And here's where I would like to point out. I think, there are aspects of climate finance, and I'll even say there are aspects of voluntary carbon markets that are positioned to reward people with monetary resources for those kinds of mitigation responses. And so we at OCON have worked out a way where we can work with a project, for example, that's doing carbon emissions reductions measurements, but also simultaneously bringing about changes in women's empowerment, and create a way that we can measure that empowerment and monetize that empowerment and make sure that those funds reach down to women's collectives, women's organizations at the community level. That's a much larger discussion. I won't go into that. There's a whole website. The standard is called the W+. And you can see, and we won an award in 2016 for the project we measured in Nepal. Again, talking about how women's drudgery can be significantly reduced. We found that the inclusion of biogas digesters into the households of mountain people and hill people radically transformed, I would say, in some cases, women's lives, because they no longer had to cut forest fuel wood, but they also were saving 2.5 hours of time every single day that they were not having to chase after fuel wood. And there's other benefits as well. So I think that's the kind of example we must very critically hit on, ways to reduce women's workloads. Otherwise, how can we expect them to become empowered and have opportunities for income generation, attending new skill training on climate smart agriculture, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing that, and this is really, I think, my last point on here, is that women's leadership is key. And it's needed now more than ever before. I mean, we understand that these women in mountains, in many cases, are already leaders, even if they are not seeing themselves as leaders. And if others in the community or the government are not calling them formal leaders, they are practicing leadership. So they need a lot of, I would say, confidence building to understand that role. And one example we found, I'm just saying, is that women in Nepal at the time after the earthquake, when everything fell apart and there was chaos in so many communities, we found it was women who had attended leadership training and had practiced leadership were able to jump into that chaotic situation and manage things and take control, not only of their own community, but then move to the next village and help them out the same. I think there needs to be a lot more support for that kind of leadership. So everything else I would have to say, I would just back up exactly what Bimala said. It was all perfect. I would also encourage my old institution of Isimot that play even stronger role. I mean, we were so pleased that we could create the gender program at Isimot back in 1999. That's been well supported, I think, over the years. But I would urge you as well to think of Isimot as maybe a place that could also start to provide more data on the situation of mountain women across the region and how they're coping with climate change. Thanks very much.
To request Dr. Govinda Sharma, and would like again to request you to be limited within the 10 minutes time.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Key Speaker, Member of the National Assembly, Dr. Bimala Rai, and distinguished guest. As being a member of the National Assembly, Dr. Rai has a very keen knowledge on women empowerment in Nepal, and she has raised, we frequently hear the voices raised by Dr. Rai in the Parliament, and all these have been included in the paper. So all these things have been well outlined by in the paper presentation, and major she has focused on the major two framework. It's empowerment, empowerment, and empowerment. So the paper outlines very clearly about the gaps and the solutions and the situation and the gender relation of the women in context of the Himalaya women, mountain women. I would like to add some of the points that need to be included that may add value to the presentation. Basically, what I would like to mention is that the mountain women are facing some of the critical situations. The main thing that we observe when traveling across the mountain is food insecurity. Food insecurity, which is outlined, which is well spelled in the Constitution of Nepal, is right to food. This is a basic and fundamental right. They are not still enjoying at their own. So we need to focus on the food secure the food security of the mountain women, and probably the second most important component related with education and other thing is their health. They have to work from the very beginning of their childhood. So mountain women, they are working on the welfare of their family right from the childhood. So this needs to be a bit addressed in context of the Nepal and other countries as well. When we talk of these things, so there are some of the components of how we can improve over these things. So basic fundamental things is exploring the opportunities where these exist. When we travel across the different point of the Nepal in the mountain, in some places we have better opportunity for tourism promotion. But in other areas, we need to focus on agriculture. And agriculture is becoming a bit challenging because of the climate change effect, and particularly these effects are more pertinent in the Himalaya and in the mountain areas. Because of the climate change effect, we are facing the problems of drought in the underneath area, floods, soil erosion in the Himalaya, in the mountain, and definitely the crop cycle change, which is influencing agricultural productivity and total agricultural production, and also their income. So, and also the women in the mountain, they are bit in pressure when these sorts of the activities, the turbulences or some things like these climate change effect has some pressure over them, over their family, particularly when they are in the verge of the food insecurity caused by the floods, landslides, and other things. And definitely many people, many household heads, they are migrating in search of employment, and it further put pressure over the women in the mountain area, and they are more critical in terms of their food insecurity, food security, and income. So what we can do in terms of, besides focusing on the fundamental right and other things that need to capacitate to enhance their livelihood, I think there are, one is tourism promotion of tourism in the possible area, but in many areas we need to focus on agriculture, mechanization of agriculture. We need to focus on the drudgery of the women, Himalaya women, mountain women, because they are working almost 3 or 4 times higher than their male counterpart. So they have to collect water from distant places. They have to work from manually in their farm. So, and another component that is where we can increase their better access on income is maybe the agro-processing component, where the high-value commodity, they can be marketed with a better assessed market, and that is definitely the mechanization would help on this regard. I have already mentioned the drudgery of reduction of the women that is caused by the scarcity of the water, and they have to collect water from different area for their family needs. And certain technology like a biogas plant. They also reduce their drudgery at their household level. Access to property and access to technology, access to training, access to credit also increases there. What we have to mention is that we have outlined all these in the Constitution, but these fundamental rights need to be ensured through the policy and actions. So these are the major component, and some of the component like a community forestry may be also one of the better opportunity for income generation in the Himalaya. So where the non-timber forest product and also the jari-buti, what we call this one, the movement can be mobilized on the mobilization of the better value addition of this component. So these are some of the component, and basically empowerment is major and active engagement of their of the women in the local local community institutions. Say for example, community forestry or school management committee or some other income generating committee or some other activities where the government have some interventions. So in this type of institution, if we can focus there, we can ensure and we can better educate them and ensure their participation, and then definitely it will empower the status of women in the Himalaya. So I would like to focus empowerment and food insecurity and solving the problems of their health, particularly who are engaged from right from the childhood. This is very critical in the Himalaya when we experience, and these are also we also need some disaggregated data. When we travel from the east, where we are, we have a better access or better tourism possibility. The status of women is a bit different. They are well advanced. But in other conditions, when we talk about the women of the Karnali provinces, we see they are working from the early in the morning to until late evening in the agriculture field. So we need to target those section of the society, those area, and also the very in this regard, what I would like to mention is this need to be covered well. The geographic diversity and geographic specificity need to be covered in terms of empowerment of the women. So these are some of the things that need to be included. Other things they have honorable the keynote presenter has well outlined the concept and right from the field to the policymaker, policy level. Thank you. Thank you for providing me opportunity as a commentator. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Govinda Sarmaji. Now, we have collected some questions online. So we have two questions actually for especially the presenter, the speaker, and I'll read it out. It's from Apurva Katke from India. He says, what about the question is, what about education facilities on the mountain in Nepal, especially for women? When we talk about women's rights, I would like to know what is the status of girls there in terms of education. That's all we have got online. Let me collect one or two questions because looking at the time, we have very limited time here. Before she responds, is there any question? May I have the hands raised? No. Thank you very much. So over to you, Bimlaji. Honorable Bimla Rai.
Hello. Sorry, Achay. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Janet. It was a long time that we didn't meet, but virtual interaction made us, this technology made us to meet today. Thank you for your input, Janet. I do agree with you, especially on the compensation part. Yes, we should not only recognize but compensate women for their invaluable contribution to address climate change issues. What about education in mountain and education of girls in Nepal? I think in terms of public education, we have made good progress. I'm very happy to share that we have gender parity in the primary and secondary education. Still higher level education, we do have males domination, but we are bridging the gap. The issue is less on access at the moment, more is about the quality of education throughout the country. And in terms of mountain women, yes, lack of access to education is one of the barriers to access to information, to access to technologies, skills, and so on. But we are improving in terms of access to education. The situation is being improved. This much I would say here. We still do not have universal coverage, but the situation is much more improved compared to 10 years ago. Let me quickly go through the Janet's comments. Nexus of climate and gender. We have several studies actually on nexus of gender, climate, biodiversity, food security. We do have this nexus approach in prevalent in study, and but in everywhere we need to emphasize on coherence, because especially as this is the policy dialogue, I focused more on policies. In terms of policies, what we have seen is, for example, climate change says women are more vulnerable, and we need to help, help them to address these vulnerabilities. But when this goes to food security, for example, food security also says women are vulnerable, but they are nowhere connected. Okay? So this connectedness is important. When we talk about nexus approach, we also need to talk about coherence in policies. Otherwise, we cannot work on nexus approach. So that's my observation. Feminization of agriculture, it was already in mountain. Yes, I do agree on that. Workload. Why I focused more on technology is because I just give you one very short example. I was in a village of Kaski to assess this impact of climate smart agriculture. When we reached to one woman, we were talking about her workload. She gave several examples of how climate change has exacerbated and how she needs to eat extra hour to work on, especially in the field because of the water issues, because of the invasion species of weeds and others. And she said that one small tool reduced her workload significantly. I give you this example. She paid 5,000 rupees for a small tool that was used to clean the cow shed. Earlier, she used to do that always in the morning, and when she bought that small tool, it was very easier for her to clean the cow shed, because you can simply use that tool and you don't need to say it, you don't need to make your hand dirty and all these things because of that simple tool, right? So more than that, it was easier for her to do the same work. The second, what she said was more important. She said, when this tool arrived at home and I started using that tool to clean the cow shed, my husband started doing that. And my children now, playing with the tool, they have started cleaning the cow shed. Now I even don't need to use that tool because there are more people to use that tool and clean the cow shed. So when you have to do by your own hand, when it becomes a more labor consuming, then you are aided with that task. But when technology comes in, there are members of family, who can also assist you. So technology not only empowered that woman, but also made her easier for making flexible gender role or sharing the workload, at least among the family members. Very simple technologies are changing gender roles in the villages. So we need to invest on tools and technologies that are labor saving, that are women friendly. and that are affordable for many women. If she cannot afford, government needs to give the subsidy on the technologies, on the tools that saves women's labor. So this is important. That's why I focused on this issue. Climate finance, yes, I do agree. This is the point that I missed in my presentation. We need to really ensure how much women get from these voluntary and compulsory climate finance things. Overall, thank you so much, panelists, and thank you for, dear Secretary. This was very important. One thing that I missed earlier was digital technology. We have seen access to digital technology has changed women's life a lot. We really need to invest to ensure that women get appropriate technologies, they are trained, and they are able to use to access to information as well as to access to technology and market. Because we have seen many women, I don't know how much it has reached to mountain women, but we have seen village women, how much they are empowered with digital technology. So we need to also invest on accessibility of that technologies to mountain women. This can be done simply. These things are not that much complicated. We don't need to complicate them. We need to really act on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like to give one chance for if anybody has a question. Stella. Oh, there are two questions. Okay, let me have Stella first and then go to the other one and then stop here. Be specific, no backgrounds, okay?
Thank you so much, and thank you for the wonderful presentations. And I thought I should not speak, but when we talk about mountain women, I could not stop myself, and I thought this is the opportunity. At least I should speak about. I think if we really be at the reality of the condition, when we are talking about mountain development, the reality is we are talking about not only development, but the survival. Because when we talk about climate change, and said, the impact is on women, and so it is not only development, but I would like to raise the question of survival. And the other question of, empowering. I become a little emotional when we talk about empowerment, because mountain women or any Nepali woman from poor community, I think they are the strongest and the most powerful women. We cannot undermine them because they don't speak the way we speak. Their style of living, their culture and traditions are totally different. But I think, these women are the ones, who are struggling every step, every minute of their life, and still, doing their job, right? So I would not really go for empowerment. Maybe the word need to be reversed. I don't know what would it really mean for empowering powerful women. At this moment, I have full respect for the men present here. I would say empower men so that they would give space to women, recognize women more work. And if we do that, I think we will do a lot of justice. And I think we really need to change our perspective. Because,
Thank you very much.
Because mountain is rejecting, river is rejecting, climate is rejecting, we really need to question the present framework and modality. I think Nepali perspective will be the best.
Thank you very much for the input and compliment. Now I would go there. It's late.
I am a social innovation and climate change professional. I have a question to the floor. I have heard about the actions, so do we have any plan of action doing a co-creation with the women in the mountain? Doing a co-creation together, access to finance to the women in the mountain. I'm talking about the field level, ground level things. Do you have any idea, or do you have an action plan to do a co-creation to the women to get the access to the finance, access to the technology, access to the healthcare, and access to the education system? So this is all about, I'm talking about finding the innovative solution for the women in the mountain. So do you have any plan? Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last hand there.
Namaste, my name is Deepawali and I work on Ministry of Forest and Environment. I don't know, it's my either question or concern, but it need to be focused because somewhere in the presentation I heard about women's roles are changing. Does it means the gender roles are changing? Because changing the women, it's only the situation that women's roles are changing and the more concerns need to be given the changing roles of men too, because the women's role doesn't mean the gender roles is changing. So we need to focus on that. And the second one is empowering women. It is the most crucial. But at the same time, we need to focus on sensitizing community, gender sensitive male. More specifically, I would like to say sensitizing male so that the empowerment gives the actual sense of actual sense. In the third one, Janet says that it has been 23 years we have been discussing in these issues, but still having all those gender responsive structures, the implementation has been a challenge. Still there, the issues of women are the same. So it's high time to work on the barrier. The barrier caused the work on the informal roles where we missed here in the presentations, here in the discussion, because it's the social norms and values that makes the women vulnerable in the mountains. At the same time, the vulnerability also creates the gender disparity. So it's high time to work on, to have a discussion on these topics. So I don't know, it's either my concern or my questions, but it needs to be discussed in this event. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now stop there. May I hand over?
Thank you. Janet Stella Di, thank you so much for this very wonderful comment. Yes, that's why I usually say, let us not call women, especially the mountain women, let us not call them victim. They are powerful women that I know. They are powerful women, but we are not being able to use or mobilize their power, or at least empowering, if I don't say empowering, but set conditions where we can use their knowledge, their technologies more efficiently to address the issues of larger society. We are constraining them. They are powerful, yes, but we are constraining them because they don't have access to required level of information. They don't have tenure rights, for example. They don't have, appropriate level of, the skill that would help reduce their work drudgery, for example. I think it's we need to focus more on mobilizing or helping them to use their own power. In that sense, right? So otherwise, I do agree with your input. Do we have action plan? That's why I said this is the policy dialogue. So I focused more on what to do with policy. Once you establish a coherence between the policies, plans, budgets, and human resources, then comes the action plan. Because currently, if you tell me, there are something wonderful work being done at the grassroots level, they are not reflected in the policy. There are wonderful provisions in the policy, they are not reflected in the ground. So there is a lack of coherence. That's why I said establishing a coherence is very, very important from the planning perspective. Otherwise, you can have a wonderful action plan, but if they are not supported with budget, not supported with human resources, not supported with policies, that won't make big difference in the ground. So establishing, I think for this year, we really need to work on establishing coherence and action plan. I'm sure the organizers have thought about it, and we will have action plan soon on that. Changing gender role. What I have seen is, I truly acknowledge your concern. A changing gender role is women's role is expanding. Men's role has not changed that much, honestly. If you look at me, I'm at the a public space. Earlier, I used to work in the household, in my office, and that was my space. Now I work as a public space as well, right? There's this public policy making is added. My household work is not reduced. Whenever I go home, I need to check in the kitchen what is cooked for my children. So the household level work, the caring economy, is still in the soldier of women. And this is the, sometimes I challenge men that you people don't know how to cook. Otherwise, you would have made it, right? So I think men are not being able to share household responsibilities, and that's why women's role is changing. In the meantime, we should not forget that because of globalization, because of the market access, women's are also very fast nowadays to change to expand their space in the community, in the market. So I think we need to empower them with new set of skills, new set of knowledge that are required, especially for the financial aspects, financial management aspects, and especially for the market. This is where we need to focus more on. I think this much sensitizing men, I do agree. Not only the sensitizing, but challenging men. Because I often I tell my husband that you don't know how to cook. I know how to, he teaches in university, so I know how to teach student, but you don't know how to cook. So I think we need to sensitize men and challenging men for that. But it takes some time. And, there are two things when we talk about gender barriers, that there are structural barriers and there are technical barriers. Fixing technical barriers is important, are easier. That's why we talk a lot about fixing technical barriers. Fixing structural barriers, Constitution has several provisions that guides us to fix some of these structural barriers where we are working on. For example, access to property right, this is the structural barriers. We are removing that. We are talking about fundamental rights of women. We are talking about reproductive right of women. These are some of the ways to address the structural barriers. It takes time. It takes time to address the structural barriers, but let us fix the technical things, technical bias that we have. At least it makes things moving. Having said that, we should not forget to hit on structural barriers that we talk about. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's give a big round of applause to the powerful speakers and interveners, both. Thank you very much. At the end, I don't know what to conclude because it has already been concluded. All the synthesis has already been there. But I would like to highlight some of the points that has to be highlighted and has been highlighted several times. And said we are now discussing on the gaps in the policies and practices and what should be our way forward. In the gaps, we have traditionally and at least for several decades that we have been talking about the gender inequality, which is still there. We have not been able to address at the root. So therefore, the speakers also highlighted on this, said we need to change our perspective and perception, and with that, we also need to change our actions. Where she has highlighted is we need to change our perception to mountain women or all women in the country or over the world, that from the participants to actors, from vulnerable groups, affected groups to active change agents. And because their contribution has not been visible, they have not been visible at the policy level, at the stage, even though they're all over in the farms, household, and even in the informal market, we need to make it visible, not only by words, not only in the papers or documents, but actually acknowledging, respecting their contribution, and also accounting the contribution of formal, informal economy, at the same time the unpaid care work, the whole account of the care economy, which is one of the very, very fundamental issue to really, once the women are respected, acknowledged, and also with the accounts, then they are much more empowered. We really need to demystify the term empowerment. Empowerment has been used and abused in a very, very different ways. So we need to do that. And when we talk about care economy, here it comes. Care economy is everywhere. Without the care economy, we cannot have any production or any increase in the productivity. That's why both the speakers said that if we take it as a cross-cutting issue, let's not leave this as cutting nowhere. Cross-cutting nowhere. So coherence at all levels, encompassing the sectors, is very important. When we address this issue, just sectoral approach is not enough. So it has to be cross-sectoral coherence, which we have practiced, but the way we go ahead and we keep forgetting these things on the way, even though it's there in our structural and disciplinary processes, like she gave the example of gender-responsive budgeting. Okay, and then we said that because this has not been accounted, the contribution in care and cost economy has not been accounted properly, there is a lack of investment. Investing in girls, even at home, is considered as unproductive. So we need to convert our term and perception at the same time approach to work on this. Invest for better productivity and sustainability. That's what I gathered. And then way forward, very clearly, Honorable Bimla has said, visibility, mainstreaming, investment specifically on reducing the drudgery, advancing and also supporting the lives of women by lessening the brunt of drudgery and recognizing their contribution, their potentiality, at the same time the power they have. So the conclusion is empower the whole society so that the society can accept, acknowledge, and learn from the power that mountain women and entire women has. Then collectively we win and we become the empowered society. Otherwise, we cannot empower the empowered ones. So let's work together with women, men, and everyone than for them. So we need to have a very participatory, collective approach of working by recognizing contribution of everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you for providing the policy inputs. Here, the whole House, international participants, and everyone has contributed a lot. Thank you, the speakers, Honorable Bimala, Secretary Govinda Sharmaji, and Janet. And those who have not been here physically, I would like to, on behalf of the organizers and especially on behalf of Government of Nepal, I would like to thank you very much. Thank you, the organizers.